Fantastic. Thank you for everyone that's joined us today. We're just going to kick things off because we respect everyone's time and we want to make sure we're going to get the most of today's hour session. So without further ado, welcome everyone to the ROI webinar series. We're thrilled to have you join us today for our session where we're going to be diving into the world of e-commerce returns and exploring how to leverage them for sustainable growth. My name is Dennis. I'm from Tidal. I was about to say my name is Tidal. I'm from Dennis. Funny one. I'll be your moderator and host for today for the 60-minute fireside chat style webinar. So we're going to try a little bit of a different format today. We're incredibly honored to have Loop, a leading returns platform, with us today to share their insights on how to grow your Shopify brand by around 30%. These are the figures. As you may know, a staggering 30% of online returns are returned due to sizing issues, inaccurate descriptions, the customer changed their mind. There's a plethora of reasons. But at the end of the day, this can lead to a significant amount of losses for you guys as merchants, retailers, and it typically will cost you around 21% of the transaction cost. So if it's not managed properly, returns can erode profits, disappoint your customers. The cycle continues, business 101. So together here with Drew from Loop Returns, we'll be exploring the current trends in the e-commerce return industry, discuss some strategies to improve your profitability, and address any of the key pain points for merchants, big or small, when it comes to growth and generating ROI. So we'll also delve into a little bit of the importance on personalization, retention, sustainability in today's fast-paced e-commerce landscape. I'm sure these are all buzzwords you guys are all excited about. So buckle up and let's get ready for some engaging, informative session that will empower you to basically transform your whole return process and drive some sustainable growth for your Shopify brand, and even if you're not on Shopify, hopefully for your brand. So let's get started. Without further ado, Drew, I'll pass it off to you. But actually, before we do that, maybe I should just give a quick summary on who Tidal is. So if you like, you can just pass over to the next slide, and I'll just do that real quick. So before we kick off and I pass off the talking stick, Tidal Commerce, we're an elite Shopify Plus partner. We're a results-driven e-commerce engineering firm, which specializes in building and managing digital store infrastructure. We optimize customer experiences, and at the end of the day, we increase sales conversions efficiently, primarily for mid-market and enterprise clients in Canada and the US since 2019. I'm dealing with enterprise businesses all over the place, so I hope I'm able to provide some value by maybe doing some experience shares today. So Drew, I'll pass it off to you now and you can take the reins.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis. And so humbled to be invited to this conversation. Hey, everybody. My name's Drew. I'm the agency partner manager here at Loop Returns. Before that, I actually used to work at a Shopify Plus agency. I guess you could consider me a frenemy of Tidal back in the day where I worked at BVA. And so been really excited to see the growth of not only brands post-COVID, but just also just the consumer expectations and what we're going to be talking about today around returns and what that means for brands and how you grow. So I wanted to kind of first just share the context of where we've gone with returns and really start with what Loop is. So Loop is a Shopify exclusive return app today. And we have built this platform that really allows you guys and your brands to see more exchanges and less refunds. And we can dive into the nitty gritty of like how we all do that. But it first starts with what we've seen. And that is buying has become really easy, but shopping still isn't. What do I mean by that? Well, before COVID, e-commerce was all about growth at all costs. I'm sure all know that it was an arbitrage game. Where can we drive revenue, whether it's through Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok? And as we entered into COVID, we saw a shift in consumer behavior. These were people who, were used to buying in store, but now had to go completely online. We saw customers engaging in new shopping behaviors around buying online and picking them up at the pickup, like at Target, right, drop off, as well as delivery. And because of that, customers were experiencing different types of brands for the first time. As we came out of COVID, though, we noticed that customer expectations around experience were not satisfied. And so because of that, a lot of brands or a lot of customers were trying different brands because they weren't experiencing the customer experience they wanted. As we all know too, we've seen these shortages coming out of COVID around supply chain challenges and stuff being out of stock. And so what do you do as a brand, right? How do you navigate this? And so it's really about how do we make the shopping experience, the engagement with the customer after they bought something, how do we make that more inviting, more fun for the customer? And as a result, what we found is that returns are misunderstood, mostly for a lot of brands, but also for customers. For many of you that are using Shopify today, exchanges is not an opportunity in the back end of Shopify. It's only just a column that has return reporting. So out the gates, exchanges were never supported in Shopify. And as a result, many brands had their return experience put into the return policy page and made it really difficult to find for customers to initiate a return. And many brands think a return automatically means a refund. You go to stores, whether it be a Home Depot, I mean, in the United States, I'm sure maybe some people are in Canada or internationally here. You go to a Target, they have a returns and exchanges center. It's not a refunds and exchanges. And so what we found in the data, as Dennis alluded to, is a lot of reasons why customers return are for wrong sizing and other issues. They don't want to do a refund, they want to do an exchange. And so when you look at the main return reasons for why brands fear returns is two main areas. First, they view it as a cost center. They automatically think it's going to be a refund. And then secondly, they believe that a customer is going to take advantage of the return policy because they make returns easy. And as a result, what we've found is that brands on average that are not using a return app see 95% of their returns end up as refunds and 5% end up as exchanges. That's talking to brands who actually know their return data. There have been many times where I get on a call with a merchant and ask them, how many returns do you see in a given month? And they don't even know that number. And it's hard to navigate in Shopify to figure out where that data is. And if you have questions around that, me and Dennis can follow up with you on some guides to help you find that data. But the return aspect is a big black box for many brands. So again, return doesn't necessarily mean it's a refund. So many brands or so many customers have the need for an exchange, and it's all about just making it super easy. So when you look at some of the results with Loop, without Loop, it's 95% refunds. But when you make it extremely easy for the customer to do an exchange or shop for a completely different price product, get a gift card, what we see for brands using Loop is that almost 30% of their returns are ending up as exchanges. Now, if you have specific questions on specific verticals, specific type within verticals, I'm happy to share more data around that. But holistically, we're seeing almost 30% of their returns ending up as exchanges, which is a game changer, especially for brands who are struggling to find areas to retain customers from acquisition costs from paid media. So I wanted to share just two examples of some brands that we work with today. So LSKD is an active wear brand. And what they did before Loop was that they didn't know how many customers were actually looking for an exchange. They didn't know how many customers were actually doing returns. It's mostly held in the Google Sheet doc. And so when they were able to implement a solution like Loop, they were able to retain 53% of their customers to do an exchange or a gift card versus ask for a refund. What that meant was that they also were able to influence customers to shop for different products. So they've generated over $128,000 that's automated for them, where the customer support person does not have to touch it. And what that is going through is through our feature called Shop Now, where we can surprise and delight a customer right before they ask for a refund and offer them a bonus incentive. It can be customized for whatever dollar amount that you want for your customers or for specific product types, and say, hey, why don't you shop now for a different product on our website? We will automatically take the customer to the website, and then we essentially will capture the payment for that upsell of that new product and check out through Loop, and then it's all automated through the delivery of the exchange. And what that resulted in is $3.03 per upsell per return. So let me break that down, what that means. So you're gonna have some customers that ask for a variant exchange, so no money transaction. You're gonna have some customers that ask for a gift card. Some customers ask for a refund. But then there's that fourth subset of customers that actually do shop for something different, And 9 times out of 10, those customers shop for higher priced items. So when you take that fourth subset of customers, you take all the revenue that they've purchased through that exchange experience and you divide it by the total amount of returns, that's the estimated revenue that you would predict for each return. So for you, as a brand that's thinking about this, the question that I would ask is, how many returns do you see today? Once you have that number in a given month, then you multiply that by, in this case for LSKD, $3.03, and that's the projected upsell revenue that you would see for a similar brand like LSKD. The second story that I wanted to share is a brand, B Store. They do a lot of footwear. They're a large retailer in Australia. And before Loop, they had 30% of their returns end up as exchanges. And now they see 50% of their returns end up as exchanges. So you might want to be like, okay, well, is this like good performance? Is this bad performance? Are they at par? Where are they at? When you look at the overall experience for brands on Loop, like I said, going back, 29% are exchanges or store credit. So to see 50% is really one of the top performers across our platform. So if you are a brand thinking about where do you stack up, happy to walk you through that. I'm about to share what that looks like today, that you can get that information. They went from not offering exchanges to now being able to offer different products entirely, which allowed them to capture $3.65 per returning customer. And they saved 550 hours by automating. A lot of brands will have a manual returns process where they're dealing with the customer via email or through chats somehow, and they have to incentivize the customer to do an exchange, a gift card, or a different product. And so by automating this entire process, they were able to save 550 hours a year. So a lot of areas to optimize and just be more proactive in the customer experience with your brands. So like I said, there is, and this is the last slide here, there is a way for you guys to understand, well, how do you compare with similar brands on Shopify? We just launched our new app called Benchmarks, and this will allow you to get more granular insight around, what are my top returning products? What's the average return fee for a label that's generated for similar brands to me in my space? By understanding this type of data, how many returns you're seeing, you can start to pinpoint which products are the drivers for refunds, what are opportunities with specific customer segments that you can influence for an exchange. And I'm happy to give you guys a more detailed report through this process. So after this conversation today, I'll make sure to share my information so we can get you set up with a free insights report through our Benchmark app. That's free. Dennis, back over to you with any questions.
So much good content. Thank you, Drew. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to ask you a couple of questions more industry-wide, maybe a little bit more specific on your knowledge set as well. It seems like you've been around the block, agency, Loop, you've kind of seen a little bit of everything, right? So probably be perfect for this. So first question going, can you define, you mentioned sustainable growth, but for merchants specifically as a whole, what do you define as sustainable growth? And how does returns exactly fit into this equation or conversation? And what should merchants on this call be expecting from Loop?
Yeah, man, that's such a great question. And, I think every brand is, my hat goes off to every single brand. I mean, not only do you have to figure out what's the latest marketing channels to acquire customers, figure out sales. Oh, it looks like we're frozen here. Am I still on?
You're still on. We see you.
Okay, great.
You're not frozen.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah, my heart goes out to you guys. You guys have to learn all these new ad channels. You have to figure out how to drive customers to your website, increase the conversion rate on the website by working with partners like Tidal. And at the same time, you have to deal with customer support, which living in a world where we have cancel culture, if you don't respond to them so quickly, they're quick to dismiss you. And so for teams of 5, 10, maybe 1, 20, whatever that number is, I just want to say, like, I see you guys. And so for sustainable growth, I think it's more of a mindset. Every brand is going to have a different P&L statement. And so only you guys are going to know what the actual costs are for your business. And it's only from there when you can start to make shifts and changes and tweaks. So when I think about sustainable growth from the lens of returns, many brands that I talk to just automatically assume that their current return performance is okay. And that's not the case. you wouldn't go to your marketing team or your agency and say, we're just performing at a 2% conversion rate and that's all we want, right? You're always going to look to improve upon that. And so from a sustainable growth perspective, I like that mindset of there's always areas where you can improve. And so from a returns perspective, it's really about first looking at, well, am I capturing the right data on why customers are returning? Am I offering them the right choices to get more insight into why they're returning? Just saying something doesn't fit is not a good enough answer. You need to give them opportunities to share more about maybe it's specific product, maybe they need education. So there's so many avenues. And so I think it first starts with asking more questions and then looking at just the basic data first. So those would be my two things. And then I would say sustainable aspect of that is looking for ways to automate. There are so many apps out there. When I say apps, like I'm not just talking about Shopify, there's just so many opportunities as a company to automate and streamline your work. And so for example, like there's a lot of brands that I talk to that don't know what Zapier is. And Zapier allows for you to streamline your communication from different apps and different business parts of the organization to really get the data in one streamlined area. And so I think it's just continual education on like what you can automate to just delegate that stuff to robots so that you can essentially focus more on getting more feedback from customers. So that's kind of my answer. Happy to dive deeper into that or a specific example, but
that's brilliant. No, makes sense totally, Drew. And I think if I'm to synthesize what you're saying, it's all boils down to the customer experience and how does the return process, how does that impact the customer experience? How does your automation maybe save your team some time, which perhaps gives them a little bit more time to spend time with customer, give them that positive experience, right? So when we're customer obsessed, I think that becomes the theme, right? So I'll move on to the next question here. Specifically, the question being, what return trends have you noticed from your brands that you're working with and their shoppers? I'm sure you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of data points on this, right? In particular, I'd be thinking of like consumer reports. What are your higher customer expectations? Is that something that is coming up? Like, are customers a little bit more needy? And specifically, like, any thoughts about the increasing cost of returns as well? Like, for example, for our brand, we're shipping out baby playpens and bassinets, and I can tell you it's really expensive to ship that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the biggest areas first is on the customer side with trends. Customer experience, I like to say, is a double-edged sword. It's you as a D2C brand, you are no longer competing with other brands in your category. You're competing with the Disneylands of the world, the HBOs of the world, the Netflixes of the world, because everyone's are evolving around customer experience. And so what I experience from one type of brand in a different category, I'm going to take those experiences and subliminally put them on my experience with a D2C brand. I'll give you a perfect example. You give a toddler an iPad and let them play around with it, and then set them in front of a large screen TV and see if they don't touch the screen. Chances are they're going to touch the screen because they're taking what they've experienced and trying to apply it to a similar product. Same with customer experience. And it's about figuring out, where do you provide these surprise and delight moments as a brand that's on par or better than these bigger brands? And so for customers, the first and foremost is, do you offer exchanges that's automated? That's the first thing I'm going to look for. If you don't, that's the first place to start. Secondly, I would say from a customer experience perspective is that, what are you doing to surprise and delight them in that worst moment, which is a return? And so what we've implemented and what we're seeing is that while brands this past year, for brands that are using Loop, they've actually incurred an increase in 24% sales, especially during the holiday season, 24% year-over-year growth in sales. And they saw a 31% increase in returns. So they're seeing more sales, more returns. You would think, oh, that's not a good thing. But actually, they saw a decrease in refunds by 11%, which means as their returns increased, their actual refunds decreased because more people are doing exchanges. And that goes back to what I said earlier, which is like, make it easy for the customer to do an exchange. The second trend that we're seeing, that I'm seeing, is that when you look at the return landscape, many brands don't feel like they need to offer a surprise and delight moment for customers. And so one of the features of Loop, like I mentioned previously, is a bonus credit. So you can customize how much money you want to incentivize a customer to stay with you if they've initially asked for a refund. So we're seeing brands, and I pull up my notes here, brands that are offering more than $10 in a bonus credit. So I'm a customer, I want a refund, but then all of a sudden you show me a surprise and delight moment to let me shop for a different product. So you give me an extra $10 or more. What we see is that customers are essentially buying something that's on average $10 more. Their overall refunds are less than 50%. So we're seeing more exchanges. And then as you go down in terms of like how much bonus credit you offer, that exchange rate continues to decrease. So the more money that brands are offering customers in the return experience, the more they're actually staying with the brand, which traditionally brands would be like, no, I don't want to offer you anything. I actually want to make it difficult to do a refund. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing just like recently. Curious to like hear any feedback or if there's any questions and what other brands or people here are hearing.
Yeah, no, I think the data is the data, right? So if there's any kind of Loop reports or anything like that, I'd love to send it out to the group that's joined us today. To switch gears a bit, I think, from an agency perspective, or I wouldn't even dare to call us an agency at this point because we're so consulting and development focused, right? We're really data driven. We do offer, I think, a little bit of a different perspective on some of the issues that you may see around logistics, returns, fulfillment, customer experience as a whole, right? So I think just switch gears, Drew, if you want to take the floor, go ahead. Like if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy just to kind of go very colloquially. I haven't prepared any of these responses, so this will be all off the cuff.
Yeah. So I was reading one of your recent articles on your website, and you were talking about, just looking at my notes here, you're talking about some of the 8 trends for 2023. And one of them was essentially customizing the shopping experience. And so from your perspective, are there like definitive levels of a brand as they must like understand and master as they're personalizing customer experience in order to like maximize that? Like, is there like set, like you have to get this first before you can get to this stage of personalization, before you can get to this stage of personalization?
Great question. Yeah, I think personalization is a very not a very mature topic yet because it's not been adopted by many merchants and brands yet to the full extent that it can be, right? There's a lot of tools like ChatGPT now, which have made a lot of advancements where it can kind of deduct or do analysis and tell you what to recommend, things like that. So we'll see like the engine of the technologies become a little bit more reliant on things like AI in the future. But at the current state, let's say with the clients we work with, even clients that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, I would say arguably less than 5% do personalization properly. The reason being is that they just really tip the iceberg. There's a lot of third-party apps out there, and there's a lot of just kind of cookie cutter approaches to personalization where, for example, I might install a carousel on my homepage or my product detail pages. So every single time, if you come to a website, you may have seen other customers may have also bought or something like that, or you may also like, so the carousel would say that. That in my mind is kind of where personalization started, right? Oh, okay, you may like this because it goes with, the hat goes with the scarf, which goes with the gloves, right? I'm going to show maybe a like products. Where that has provided a lift, I think is probably pretty significant still, right? Like that's one level of it. The second layer of personalization comes down to data gathering, which has now become an issue for most brands, right? So if you reverse engineer the problem and really think about what are you trying to solve for, you're trying to understand the customer and you're trying to serve up for them a relevant experience to lead them to maybe a higher likelihood of closing, right? Whatever that may be. To do that, you need to provide them value, right? How do you do that? Content, personalization, which is content at the end of the day, right? So when you think of it that way, really the issue today is that you can't collect that data easily anymore. What used to be literally, a very dark part of the web where you could just buy that data or easily acquire it through third-party tools has become very much so under lock and key today, right? So the options today are you could survey your customers, right? There are novel ways of creating great surveys so you can reverse engineer what kind of data are you going to show to a client. For example, one of the customers we work with is a national toy store here, the largest toy store in Canada. When I think of them and I think of personalization, I think of who am I shopping for? I'm thinking of, the age ranges are typically what comes into play. Am I buying for a baby, or am I buying for a 3-year-old, or am I buying for my teenager? Or am I perhaps the uncle that forgot to buy something and now last minute I've got to find something, right? So what is the persona of the shopper and who is the actual product being bought for? So when you think of personalization of that lens, you can then apply your own knowledge of things like carousels or perhaps changing the actual content of the website to lead to a better customer experience. So if you really think of that as the end objective, I think you'll always end up being successful. Personalization is just another tool, another trend, I may say. I won't call it a fad because I think it'll continue to go on. But over time, you'll see there'll be personalization 2.0 and 3.0, whatever else comes out, right? That over time, if you continue the consistent focus on your customer, you will always win. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but I think that provides maybe some of my perspective and opinions as well.
No, I love that. It actually reminded me of a hypothesis I've been experiencing and feeling working at Loop, but at the same time also seeing out there and affirming with brands, and that is around data and capturing that data and using it. I think that when we work with brands, many of them will come in and they just automatically just set up the app to just be standard bare bones, where they say, here's my return reasons, and that's it. And I think the reason for that is because they automatically assume like Loops should have it set up for us. Like we don't have the expertise in understanding the return data. And at the same time, these are people who are managing a lot of different things inside the organization. And so their ability to leverage and connect the data and find, opportunities for insights is overwhelming. And so Harvard Business Review, I'm just looking at my notes here. Harvard Business Review came out with a report that essentially said like, there are a lot of people in retail that are struggling with using advanced analytics. And so, and what they said was like the company culture, the org structure of how it's set up, the skills of the employees, the processes and systems in place for these brands are a lot of the roadblocks for why they are struggling with using data. And so I'm just curious, like, what have you seen as like, are any of those resonating with you and what you're seeing with the brands that you're working with? Or are there other areas where you see, brands are struggling to adopt the data and actually use it?
Right on. I think your question is perhaps a little bit more pervasive and agnostic of company type and industry than you may think, because exactly what you just said is the same issues a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company may have as well, right? It really boils down to you have a lot of decisions to make as a brand owner. You have a lot of business decisions to make as an entrepreneur. Everyone's dying for your attention. Everyone wants a raise. Everyone wants something, right? So at the end of the day, it's a ruthless machine that will never stop. It does not care. And there's no one that is irreplaceable from that perspective, right? All of us, right? We're just part of that system. So when you think of that, right, and when you think of kind of the impact that you can make as a leader, so whether you're e-commerce manager or maybe the CEO or perhaps the accountant, down to the janitor, it doesn't matter who you are, right? So I think when you really boil down to goal setting, like being a key tool that a lot of entrepreneurs and perhaps executives don't use enough, focusing on 3 to 4, maybe maximum 5 different goals. At Title, we call them rocks, right? And we do this every quarter. We would say every quarter, these are the 3 to 5 different things that everyone needs to be behind, right? So at the end of the day, if you can measure and quantify that, you have something objective there that I can look at. I can ask, are you seeing the same thing? No. Are you seeing the same thing? Yes. So who's correct here? And then we at least can dive into it, right? So I would say that probably is a key thing for brands that are struggling with analytics, is like really question to yourself, why do you need all this fancy schmancy, all these bells and whistles? What are you actually going to use the data for? I can guarantee you, half of you, with all your analytics, you probably use less than 5% of what it's capable to do, right? These are tools that Google's invested billions and billions of dollars, like they bleed cash. They don't know where to put their cash, so they put it into this stuff, right? So at the end of the day, when you really think about what are you really going to leverage this data for, what can you, with your limited knowledge of, let's say, marketing research, obtain out of this without bringing in external people, right? And that's when I think of even myself as an entrepreneur. What can I do with the data that I have, right? We use analytics, we use Google, we use all these other tools as well. So the way that we focus into it is to say, this is what matters, this is what we should be measuring, and let's report on it weekly. Let's have weekly meetings, let's discuss it, but let's not get too distracted by all the noise and all the distractions, right? And what we consistently find is when people focus down on this, they achieve better results. And it really isn't rocket science. I think it's counterintuitive to human nature, where we think, oh, I'll work the next person. It's like you're pissing in the wind. The work doesn't matter, right? The amount of effort you put into it is inconsequential of the result. Did you win or did you not? Did you fail or did you win, right? So from that perspective, if you're looking from a binary perspective, of course, there's a lot more to life than that, or work to that. But I think if you really define your goals, you're able then to focus and not get distracted by, oh, this analytics platform isn't working, or ads are not tracking here, right? When I hear even executives and leaders talk about, their ad spends, and we have, brands that spend millions of dollars every month on ads, right? At the end of the day, it's not really about, optimizing the ROAS or anything like that, right? But it comes down to amplifying the effort you're already doing. If the effort you're already doing is mediocre and not getting you anywhere, you amplifying it is just going to amplify a mediocre product, or the mediocre whatever you're doing at the beginning, right? So really making sure whatever you have at the core itself is correct at the beginning, and then that'll lead to better results, right? So I'm sure you can kind of see the common theme of myself maybe focusing more on the roots of things and foundational instead of all the 500 different buzzwords.
Yeah, no, I love that. That reminds me of just kind of these foundational things sometimes are not even addressed as brands that are doing over 10 million in GMV on Shopify. And I was actually just speaking with a brand that we work with, a footwear brand, and they did 35 million in the past 12 months on Shopify. And when we were talking with them about this new feature called Shop Later, so it's essentially a win back campaign where we can trigger an email, whether it's through our Loop portal or through the Klaviyo integration. If you leverage Klaviyo, we can offer our customers to shop for a different product if they've already committed for a refund. It's a really cool tool that we just launched, and so we were talking with them about it. And a brand doing 35 million a year, they don't have the foundation set up for post-purchase emails and communication after customers bought something. And post-purchase, we stand on this ground that post-purchase is so core of a foundational aspect with your customers in terms of engaging with them after they've made something or they've returned something, right? So I'm just curious, like, what are you seeing or what are you hearing from a foundational perspective around post-purchase? Are brands stuck on certain areas about it? Or is there just like certain areas that they have questions on? Just curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, post-purchase is an interesting one because it's really about, bringing back the customer that you may have already lost, or perhaps after the purchase, as kind of explained, right? So there's the abandoned cart kind of flow, which is kind of not truly the post-purchase. It's more, hey, you looked at it, I got you engaged, and I'm going to contact you and try to maybe get you to buy, versus the post-purchase of like, hey, you bought for me, and I'm going to make your experience beautiful until you get the product, right? And we were just debating this actually as a team this morning. I recall who I was talking to about this, but the whole dilemma of, what most brands miss the mark on is that, let's say I sold you, I don't know, this glass of water, right? So you're shopping online for this glass of water, and I've given you the most beautiful marketing speak. You get the vision, you get the mission of what my company is, right? I'm basically hydrating the world, right? Like I've invented water, right? So like you're in it, you got it, right? So at that point, if I take 2 months to deliver you my case of water, or perhaps, I charge you $100 for that shipping of that water, whereas the water may have been, I've maybe charged you $5 for the actual product itself, right? Then there's an imbalance with the customer experience, right? So from a perspective of like post-purchase, right? Like I think what is often missed is like this whole post-purchase experience is just as important as making the sale. You got them in, that was your hook, right? Now, equivalent to, let's say, our business, right? So, you know what? We started working with a brand. All right, fantastic. In my case with services, it's like a foot massage, right? You can't really know if they're any good until you go and get the foot massage, right? You're going to try out another place, and that you're probably, you're going to get sold something until you really try. You don't know, right? And it's the same thing for brands. When you think of that mentality, every experience is that way, but you're just doing it at scale with perhaps tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of packages you're sending every single month, right? So what happens is when you're not able to automate certain things, so the post-purchase email flow you mentioned, right, with Loop and those kind of innovations you guys bring to play, what often will happen is the 3PL will screw up. We all know 3PLs will always screw up, so just no arguing against it, right? The fact of the matter is they're not your brand. They don't care. They're not your company. They're never going to care. They're never going to have the same attention to detail. And there's never going to be any argument against that because it's siloed and it's a very important part of the business, right? But there are ways around it. So take Amazon as an example, right? You get your product within 2 days. They've solved it because they have the scale and the infrastructure for it. So when you create an Amazon experience like that, and I get my water in 2 days, now I'm a happy customer, right? Where you may fail is you may basically deliver the product to the wrong location, or maybe it arrives lost, stolen, or damaged, right? So there's different elements to what may happen afterwards. But I think that is a focus. Like really, if I was a brand doing anything over 10 million, as you said, even beyond that, let's say a few 100 million, I would probably start off with listing out or going through my own purchase experience and seeing what the post-purchase experience is like. And then I would criticize it to no extent. I'd focus on things that I would nitpick on, would be like the speed of the delivery. What was the customer support like? Did I hear from them afterwards? Did they send me a nice note to thank me for the purchase? What was the transaction email like? So when I got it, am I confused? Like, was there some additional charge here, or is it just unclear? How easy is it for me to engage with your company to return the product? All these things continue to go on and on. Be your worst customer, put yourself in those shoes. And at the end of the day, what you'll end up uncovering is these gaps, these holes, and what they're opportunities for you to do better, right?
Yep. Every engagement is a great opportunity for a positive one for the customer, I think. So that's
great. It's the right attitude, Diggs. That's exactly it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we can go more on questions, but I just didn't know for time's sake. Obviously, we want to support people who had questions too. So where are we at with time? How are we doing?
We're looking good. I think we might be able to wrap up a little sooner today. So I think, in the respect of everyone's time, we will be recording, obviously we have been recording the session. We'll be sharing it with everyone, but I'd love to hear from, our guests today. If there's any questions for Drew and myself, we're more than happy to take them up right now. So why don't we take the next 10, 15, 30 seconds. If anyone has a question, you can please use the raise hand or just drop it in the notes, in the comments, in the chat. And if not, you can always reach us offline as well. We're very available and very responsive. Anyone have any questions?
I would love to hear also too, like maybe a prompter for a question is just, has anyone been using a return app before? Or what type of brand do they work with or consult for?
Well, we start there, yeah. If anyone wants to share is anyone using any return apps? Is this something that's new to you all? That's okay, I guess. We have a little bit more of a shy audience today. That's totally okay. We'll be sharing the details here of the recording afterwards. So thank you again, Drew, for making the time, joining us, of course, and taking the time to put together the presentation, all the great facts. For our guests today, please keep in mind the ROI webinars will be kind of an ongoing series. We'll continue to have more and more fantastic vendors like Drew and Loop come in, primarily to share the innovations and the technology behind the scenes. So these meetings and webinars are really not meant to sell you anything. It's meant to expose you to new technologies and also introduce a key player at the vendor. So Drew in particular is the head of partnerships at Loop. So, he is the right person to have in the room. If you guys have any questions, absolutely, like anything to do with returns, not even Loop, just pick his brain. He's definitely one of the experts in the industry. So thank you again, Drew, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.